Now, Halima Lioni is an advocate for men's mental health and serves as a founder and executive director of Life After Abuse Foundation. Good morning, Halima Lioni. Great to have you on the show this morning. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having
thank
me.
you
Yeah,
for
Good
it's all
joining
morning.
it's always good morning to you. It's always a delight having you on Tea or Coffee. Now, this particular topic this morning we're discussing protecting children against child against molestation. And in your line of work, this is something that you've interfaced with heavily. In your experience, what is it like, dealing with, protecting children against molestation in your experience so far? Let's kick off with that.
It's good to be back, and thank you so much for shedding light on such an important topic. I joined in as at when you were speaking about molestation towards the boy child. That was something I planned to lay emphasis on. But in my experience with dealing with child sexual abuse, I would say that there are a lot of factors that contribute to survivors not getting the help that they need. One of them is the social cultural factors, the fact that some parents would not want, in quotes, their child's story out there, and then they prevent the child from getting the help and the support that they need. But one thing that relevant stakeholders need to understand is that there's help. After abuse, you need to get the survivor the help that he or she needs, because the long-term effect of sexual abuse is far-reaching and sometimes could last a lifetime. But with the right support, which every family just sweeps under the rug, with the right support, anyone, absolutely anyone can recover from the effect of child sexual abuse. Being a survivor myself, I can attest to that fact that with the right support, with the right psychological support, you can heal, you can recover from absolutely any trauma.
All right. Okay, so now we've already shared one of the experiences of a respondent. And now that was from Ondo State. Let's take this one from Lagos, where someone is saying, mine was when I was in primary school. We were living in a rented house then. One evening, a co-tenant that we all call Auntie in the compound invited me to her house. She was single and living with her elder sister. I innocently followed her and she took me straight to her room. She closed all the windows and asked me to pull my clothes. She said she wanted us to bathe together. I agreed, since she comes to help us with after-school classes and assignment. And this respondent goes on to say, I was butt naked and she asked me to chill on the bed a little. She was tired. The moment I laid on the bed, she covered me with a wrapper and joined me on the bed. Then she started kissing and fondling me. She asked if I liked it. Of course I did. So I said yes. She said if I ever wanted to do it again, I must never tell anyone. So it started out as once or twice a week. At a point, I was the one pressuring her. Whenever she's done helping my siblings with their assignment, I'll wait till she's about to leave. Then I'll follow her to her room with my assignment. It became our little secret till we moved to our house. Imagine how horrific this is for a child. And this, I mean, it's just so sad, because this is an auntie that a mother would be happy and saying, thank God, I've seen someone that will be helping my children
Someone
with
the
their assignment.
community trusts.
I mean, someone that everybody trusts, and everybody's saying, oh, okay, or parents are like, I'm busy. Go and meet auntie. She will help you with your assignment. She will help you with work. It's just really, really worrisome. Now, please, Halima, can you just tell us, like from a professional perspective, what you think of this and how parents need to be aware and not just feel like everybody is truly, genuinely caring about their children?
So unfortunately, this young man's story is the story of many boys, all over the world, especially in our climate in Nigeria. 1 in 10 boys have been sexually abused before the age of 18. But I beg to disagree, because I believe that the only reason why we don't have that much statistics, for the girl child, is 1 in 3 girls, have been sexually abused before the age of 18. But for the boy, according to the United Nations, it's 1 in 10 boys. And I beg to disagree, because I believe that there's a silence culture surrounding male sexual abuse. So a parent's default a parent's reflex action is to protect the girl child basically, and not necessarily pay attention to the boy child. And I believe that parents, and not just mothers now, again, this is another perspective that
Yeah.
we need to look at, because when it comes to taking responsibility for a child, everybody is educating the mother, you know, it's the mother that should protect the child. You know, the father is too busy. No, both parents have a responsibility to protect the girl child and the boy child. So back to the boy story. This is many boy stories, and the unfortunate truth is there was a trending story sometime on Twitter, and a young boy, a young adolescent boy, or who is now an adult anyway, came out to tell a story of how this a similar story of how his house help used to, you know, molest him and touch him. And it was his fellow men that came out to say, but you were supposed to enjoy it. But one thing we need to know when it comes to male sexual abuse is that even if the boy had an erection, even if the boy enjoyed it, it doesn't mean that he was not molested. It doesn't take away the fact that he was abused, and it doesn't take away the fact that he will not go through the long-term effects of sexual abuse. Again, another thing that, you know, people always sweep under the rug is that a boy who has been sexually abused does not feel any emotions, does not feel any emotions such as depression, PTSD, you know, pretty much everything that comes with being sexually abused. And we need to actually counter that fact, because there are so many men out there. The only reason why they're not telling their stories, we're not seeing stories flying around, is because of the silence culture. Men have been socially conditioned to man up, to not speak about their trauma, to not speak about their abuse. But I tell you for free, there are lots of men today that are even married that are still going through the long-term effects of abuse just because they've been sexually abused. They struggle with intimacy in their marriage just because they've been sexually abused. They struggle with intimacy in their relationship. It affects their work, it affects their relationship, but it affects pretty much everything in their life. But because, again, men are supposed to be men, you know, they are supposed to man up. They're not supposed to speak about their emotion and their trauma. So this is not spoken about enough. But again, this is just a call to action to parents and relevant stakeholders. We have a responsibility to protect the boy child and the girl child.
All right, so just as we conclude, let's talk about some, some signs, some warning signs that a child might be experiencing molestation. What are some of those signs that parents, the community generally can look out for, that this child is probably, experiencing molestation?
Okay, so the most common sign is actually withdrawal.
Okay.
Withdrawal, nightmares, not wanting to be around a particular auntie or uncle or cousin. Another sign is actually when a child sexualizes everything, sexualizes every toy, these are, signs to look out for: inappropriate sexual behavior with his friends, maybe with his siblings, or another sign is, maybe when for the girl child, when you're trying to, wash our private part, she might be feeling pain. And then for the boy child as well, when you're trying to wash his private parts, when you're having his bath, he might be feeling pain. And, these are signs that only a present parent, can actually pay attention to, or can identify. Right. I know that, we live in an age where everybody's busy, but it's actually very important as parents to create time, to be involved in our children's, to create time to be involved in our children's lives. Right. So these are just, some of the common signs. Nightmares, not wanting to go to school, withdrawing. I remember when I was a child as well, my mom, when I came out to tell my story, I never told my mom as well. And then she would say that, I used to be withdrawn. Even my aunties, when I eventually came out with my story, and then, there was a family meeting and all of that, different people had different things to say. And one of the things was that I was very withdrawn. When children are playing in the neighborhood or in the compound, I would just always be by myself. I was very sad. I was very, I was always isolated. Now, this might not necessarily mean that the child is being abused, but these are just one of the common signs of a child who's been abused.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Halima, for joining us on the show, and for also sharing your experience. Honestly, your work, with the Life After Abuse Foundation is actually amazing. It's always wonderful to have you on this platform. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, now that is Halima Laini speaking extensively, on the boy child, because that is actually where her work, when it comes to the context of this conversation, child molestation is actually founded in. And I'm glad that we've had Halima on the show, because a lot of people think that, when it comes to a boy child, as she cited as example on X, formerly known as Twitter, where some of the guys they are saying that, oh, you should have enjoyed it. This is a boy, this is a child getting raped by a female sexual predator. There's not the statement like you should enjoy it should not be what that should not be the priority of the conversation.
I have another guest who fits who fits this conversation clearly and is going to give us more insight from other perspectives. We have WURAOLA Abulaton with us. She's a communications professional, feminist, and sexual and gender-based violence activist. Thank you very much, WURAOLA Abulaton, for being our guest this morning.
Thank you for having me, because I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, now straight into the conversation. We've had Halima who has given us a perspective on parents, what parents can do. Now these children are in session. School just resumed. What can the school system do? What can teachers do? What can the administrators in schools do to be more observant of children and can tell signs if children are molested, or to even tell, because we know school teachers also molest children?
Okay, thank you very much. That's actually a very important question, because in our experience in trying to teach consent to children, whenever we go to schools, they're like, oh, you want to tell them about sex. They rarely allow organizations come and teach them about personal autonomy and, consent. So the first thing schools need to do is actually teach these children these things as well. Because in forms of socialization, the family unit socializes children. School is another major unit that does that. So school administrators, they have a responsibility to also teach children about personal autonomy, about consent, right? And ensure that, they know their body, but they are able to say no, because consent is not only related to sexual activities. Once you can teach a child from small to say no to things that make them uncomfortable and to respect other people's no or yes, it makes it easier for them to say no to things that affect their body as well. And then some of the cases we've seen and we've handled, what we see is that it's actually teachers that notice that their children are able to talk to. So take, for example, a minor is being abused at home. Of course, they don't feel safe at home, right? But in school, because they spend a lot of their times in school, teachers are more in a better position to observe their behavior, to observe changes in behavior. I believe you've touched the signs that you could check to see if a minor is being abused, right? So teachers are even in a better position to see some of these signs, and then, they can talk to the children. Some children feel safer, they can talk to their teachers, and then escalate it. And then the most important thing that schools can now do is to never stand behind the abusers. We've seen cases where, like you said, teachers, caregivers in schools, they are the one abusing the children, then the school wants to start siding with them, providing them legal support, or more important, or even worse, covering it up. Right? And then schools have a responsibility to actually do background check on teachers. We've had cases where a teacher or teachers or caregivers, they've been let go from other schools based on, oh, they were inappropriate with the child, and then you see other schools just employing them straight up. Because these people, they have the closest access, right, apart from the parents, to these children. So they need to do proper background checks. They need to train their teachers and staff. We have what we call best practices, right? You need to know how to spot if a child, if the behavior is what the cause is. You need to know how to talk to them comfortably to get them to trust you. And all that. So they need to train their staff. They need to let their staff know that any of this behavior will not be tolerated. Once it is found, we are going to report you, and we are going to ensure that appropriate justice is served. So those are some of the things that schools can do.
All right, we actually had 3 respondents who shared their stories of child molestation with us on the show this morning. But before we get into that, I picked something very interesting from what you said about sexual education. Some parents listening in on the show this morning, they'll question you as you experienced in your career so far. That's what do you mean by sexual education for my child? So my question is, how early can sexual education be administered to children in the context of child molestation?
Thank you very much. That's actually a very important question, because, and then we don't necessarily like to call it sexual education, because as you said, parents are like, oh, once they hear sex, but it's more, you start with what we call bodily autonomy. That means everyone and personal space, right? Everyone has a right to their body. So for example, you have a child, you say, oh, hug your auntie. if the child says, I don't want to hug you, I don't want to hug my auntie, you should let that child's right be respected. Don't force children to do what they don't want
In a
to
culture
do.
like ours?
That's what we are saying. Because I'm sure we need to start. Yes, and that is what we need to encourage now.
Okay.
Because what you are doing is you're not respecting the rights of that child. And in a situation where an adult now come and say, come and hug me, they are not able to, even though they don't want to hug the adult, they're like, oh, because I've been forced, that is respect. It is not. It opens grounds for abuse for the child. Now, you can, as young as, once the child, they're able to speak, as low as 1 year old, I'm serious. And the thing is, what you need to start with in those instances is just tell them about your body, right? There's no need to call private parts in fancy names or all of these things. So there's this tactic we use, it's called the traffic lights.
Right.
So there are areas that are called the red parts, nobody touches them, right? You let them know that, oh, there are private parts here, don't let any other person touch them, you know, your chest, right? Your back, all of that. Don't let any other person touch them. Like, oh, did someone touch you? You know, you're able to validate their feelings. You know, a child should be able to come and tell you, mommy, this person did this, I don't like it. There's a good example recent, and then for them to be able to report what we call suspicious behavior. So one woman was like, they got a new maid, and then her 9-year-old daughter came and said, I don't want this maid, I don't like this maid. And they're like, why? And they said, whenever we are all together, she calls me by my name, but whenever I'm alone with her, she calls me baby.
Wow.
Wow.
Imagine that.
That's a smart child.
That's a very smart child. And more importantly, the parents have created a safe space where that child can come to them with that.
Actually.
Open up.
Open up. And more importantly, they listen to her. And, you know, they thought that maid was fantastic, but they had to let her go for the safety of their child. Another example was Vector tweeted how his mom, when she was, you know, before the age of 8, it was very alarming to me. It was like a particular man was trying to molest her, and this mom went and actually told adults, they're like, this person is trying to abuse me, and they didn't even answer or do anything until the mom now had to take a stick one day and hit the man's head, and then that's when they now believed, like, why did he have to get to there? And I'm even glad, and that's even someone that maybe his impulse or his will to do harm was not strong. Because what are you telling me, that a child of less than 8 years old carries stick, like someone that is dedicated to doing harm, will definitely would have overpowered that child. So parents need to create such a space where your child can come to you. Like, there's internet now, children will have access to like so many things. They need to come to you with anything. And more importantly, you need to let them know that whatever they tell you, you have their best interests at heart. You don't want to judge them, right? You don't want to make them feel like they are at fault for whatever it is they've seen.
So it all boils down to the home being a safe space when it comes to protecting children from molestation at the end of the day. Okay, we have a very fascinating case study in form of a response. Now, this particular one, it's somebody who was in public transport and saw something very suspicious. Now, this person from Lagos, I once experienced a deeply unsettling incident that continues to weigh on my conscience for not taking action. On a particular day, I boarded a bus from Berger, headed down to Mowe Bafo. I occupied the very last seat, adjacent to the window. Seated beside me was a young man, and next to him, another man. The man on the far end of our seat was holding a baby, a little girl. He was holding a baby, a little girl who appeared to be around 3 or 4 years old. Now, this person continues saying, during the journey, the child's intermittent crying caught my attention. However, what kept my focus on him was the man's peculiar behavior. His movements and the way he handled the child were unnaturally forceful, making me deeply uneasy. I kept quiet for a while, still trying to observe and be sure of what I was thinking it to be. The mother of the child, who sat right in front of the man, repeatedly requested the man to hand over the child, but he adamantly insisted that the child was fine and retained his hold on her. Fortunately for me, the two guys that were blocking my view alighted, giving me more room to observe properly what was going on. And as I kept on observing, I noticed unsettling movement that strongly hinted at harm being inflicted upon the little girl. He was definitely molesting the child right there on the bus. The constant rubbing of the girl's thigh against his jean trousers, and the intensity was just so worrisome. However, I convinced myself that I still needed concrete evidence before taking any action, like possibly making a video secretly or something of such. But while all those thoughts were still going on in my head, I reached my bus stop. To this day, I bear the burden of guilt for not intervening. intervening. Regardless of his relationship with the child, whether he was her father, brother, or just a friend of her mother, the fact remains that he was causing harm, and her cries were a heart-wrenching plea for help, and I did nothing about it. Right. Now, very heart-wrenching response, to be honest, you know, from this particular respondent. You know, this is a man who is saying, who he believes has witnessed a child molestation on a public transport. That is even more worrying. You know, how things like this actually perpetuate in public spaces like this. You know, I want you to react to this particular story, but I also want you to talk about the fact that we don't particularly have a sexual offenders list in this country. You know, in some Western countries, they have sexual offenders list, and that is how you're able to. And once that person has been tagged as sexual, that's a different conversation, you know, about tagging and not tagging such people. But once that person has been tagged a sexual offender and he appears on the list, you know, for instance, if it's a teacher, going back to the conversation that we had, that person probably won't be able to get a job in another school. So what is your response to this story, and how do you respond to the fact that Nigeria doesn't have a strong sexual offenders list?
This is actually a very disheartening story, and it boils back to what we call bystander intervention, right? So when you see something, that's why we always say when it comes to sexual abuse and violence, when you see something, you have to say something. While it's good to get evidence, like he waited, but what would have helped is at that instance, that child, you know, was being caused harm. So you don't need to wait for evidence. Like, this child is crying, give him to the mom. You don't even need to accuse the man in this case, right? Like,
Safety of the child.
Yeah.
God bless. Just by the virtue that the child is crying, the mom has actually said, give me my child to carry. What the person should have done in this instance is just to step in, right, and say, this child is crying, give the child to the mother, right? I don't know, like you said, we don't know their relationship, we don't know, maybe they would have gone on, but just in that instance, you relieved that minor, right, of that agony that they were in. And that's one thing, that's why we implore to Nigeria, because what makes rape culture, what makes this thing rampant, right, is this culture of silence. And it's something we say every time. You can be the person to create a change. Like, you don't know the lives you're saving just by speaking up, just by shaming someone, because what we've realized is perpetrators are abound, right? But there are so many repeat perpetrators, and that's because they feel they can get away with it, right? You've seen someone commit something, you look away, they're like, okay, I guess, you know, it's normalized. This is acceptable now. They go and hurt so many more people, right? Meanwhile, even if you just spoke up that one day and like, that's not cool, or don't do that, or just let them know that that is unacceptable. They would think twice, because one thing Nigerians don't like is shame and disgrace. They would think twice about it, right? So we need to do more in speaking up. You need to be an active bystander. It's so easy for you to be like, oh, it's none of my business, or other people are there, they're not saying anything. It takes one person to make a particular change. It just takes once one person speaks up, before you know it, other people too will be there, right? Like, what's going on? Give the child his mother now. Why is the child crying?
Actually.
True.
That's how we are in our community.
That is it. Yeah. They will speak up. Now, there are some cases where some people will now maybe try to beg for the person, because this same transport incident has happened where someone is like accusing someone of like, oh, this person touched my leg. Like, leave him now. But you have to stand your ground,
All
right? I'm like, this is unacceptable. And all of you supporting this person, you are as bad as them.
Actually.
Wow. Oh,
that's it, yeah.
Okay.
And about the sex offenders registry, like you're correct, we don't have a strong one, but we do have one. And it is managed by NAPTIP, I believe. The thing is not easily accessible. You can go there, you need to submit some things to see it. It is not very much updated.
It's not open.
It is not as open for everyone to see. And that's why this burden falls on caregivers, because schools, churches and other organizations actually can get access to it.
Right. Okay.
Right. You just need to go. You know, once you submit that, you have a legible. And then some states actually have their own. Ekiti State does a wonderful job of keeping. Yeah, they do. They put it on social media. We follow their social media.
Okay.
They have a strong what we call SAC, a Sexual Assault Referral Center. So such centers, they provide medical, psychosocial, that is therapy, and also legal support to survivors. And then they have mainframe for ensuring that justice is gotten. Lagos State too has a very good one, DSVA. Right, and that once you go there, once your case there, the speed is, because one thing that happens in sexual assault cases, especially regarding minors, sometimes it can drag for so long. It doesn't need to do that. So they are able to. They have some laws, special laws that are able to get people justice fast.